guys, today I'm going to be showing you 6 different watercolor techniques that you can experiment with at home. Now what I have gathered here is a paintbrush and some water. I have my watercolor palette. And remember, if you don't have watercolor or a different kind of paint that you could thin out, then what you can do is you can make your own watercolors from the video last week using markers, which I've already colored some of my marker here, or food coloring, which is what I have drops of right here. Now I'm going to be using both my watercolor palette and my homemade watercolors to show you that they work equally as well when doing these watercolor techniques. A few other things that I have gathered for these techniques today is salt. This is coarse sea salt, but regular table salt will work just as well. I also have a little cup of lemon juice. If you do not have lemon juice, rubbing alcohol or hydrogen peroxide can also be used, but please check with your family, with an adult, before using something like rubbing alcohol. I also have a few crayons. I also have a piece of plastic wrap and a piece of wax paper. If you do not have wax paper, this is just used for cooking, but you could also use a tissue or a crumpled up piece of regular paper. It does not have to be wax paper. All right, let's get started with this. The first one I'm going to show you is called wet on wet. And all that means is you're going to wet your paper first, a lot of water on your paper, before adding any paint to it. And by getting the paper wet, you are going to allow the watercolor paint or whatever paint you're using to spread once it touches the paper. You can see I'm using my marker for this one, my blue marker. I'm also going to use some food coloring, which will be a little bit darker for you to see. If I hold it in place, it will spread. Can use a little bit of my regular watercolor as well. And now something else you can do is you can just add drops of water on top to help it spread more. If it's not spreading as much as you would like, you just add more water. And it just gives you a really interesting technique. You're not going to be able to control everything that it does, but I like that. I think that's really interesting, the way it just moves around your paper. Another technique I'm going to show you today is wax resist. Now the wax we're going to be using is just crayon wax. So I'm using white. You can use whatever color you want of your crayon. It does not have to be white, but white is going to be a little bit more of a dramatic difference because the white is going to be the same color as the paper, and then when I paint on top, you're going to see what happens. I'm just going to do polka dots. They're nice and quick. And then when I choose a color, I'm going to use a dark contrasting color. And I'm going to paint right on top. And you're going to see everywhere that I had crayon, the crayon is going to resist the paint. The next one I'm going to show you is using salt. Remember I said I have sea salt, but table salt works very well. And first grade and kindergartners actually did this at the beginning of the school year when we were working on our art fundraiser project. First grade did turtles and kindergarten did fish, and we painted our backgrounds blue, and then we sprinkled salt on top to make it look like bubbles, like the ocean that our animals were swimming in. So I am just painting a color here, and then I'm going to take my salt and I'm going to sprinkle it on while the paint is still wet. And then I'm going to leave it for a few minutes. And what is going to happen is the salt is going to be absorbing some of that paint and it's going to be leaving white spots behind. Once my paint has dried, I can brush my salt off. The The next one I'm going to show you is lemon juice. Lemon juice might be my favorite reaction. Remember, if I said if you don't have lemon juice, you could get permission from your family if you do have something like rubbing alcohol, hydrogen peroxide, something like that. But please check with your family before even trying to do that. But lemon juice is a nice, safe way to do this experiment. I'm going to be, once again, using my food coloring, my nice blue food coloring here. And now I'm going to take my brush and my lemon juice, and I'm just going to be dropping drops of lemon juice right onto my wet paint. And you can see it's already starting to react. It's causing the paint to move around, to spread. It's pushing the paint away, and you're able to see a bit more of the paper underneath. And I can touch it gently, brush, and get these little dot effects. And you can see it's making some areas very light where there's a lot of lemon juice, and it's forcing the paint away to the edge. I really like that one. Now, my next one is going to be with crumpled paper. Get some watercolor on here. Maybe use a little bit more red food coloring to brighten that up. And you are welcome to mix colors while you're experimenting with this. I'm using a mix of regular watercolor and food coloring here. I'm going to take my piece of wax paper. Remember, you don't need to have wax paper to do this. It could be regular paper. It could be a tissue. It doesn't matter. But the wax paper kind of holds its shape really well, as would regular computer paper, printer paper would do well. So I'm crumpling it up, and I'm going to have it in a bit of a little ball here. And I'm going to just be dabbing my paint, my wet paint, and you can see it's adding a texture. It's picking up some of the paint with my paper, and it's making it pool in other places. So you're just going to end up with an interesting texture when you're done. And our last technique is using plastic wrap. So once again, I'm going to grab some paint here. I'm going to mix some of these colors together. A little bit of green. Make it a little more interesting. A little more blue. You guys can do whatever you want with this. Okay, and then I'm going to take my plastic wrap, open it up, lay it right on top of my wet paint, and gently push down. And the cool thing about this is it's going to spread out your edges of your wet paint a little bit. You can manipulate, meaning move around your plastic wrap a bit if you would like to. And then you're going to let it dry a little bit. And if you're impatient, you can pull it up now. I will show you the effect. If you let it dry, the paint will not spread around as much once you lift it. But it's a pretty cool effect. Now this is one that I've had drying for a little while. So I can peel the plastic wrap off. And you can see is if you let the paint dry with the plastic wrap stuck to it, the patterning is going to be much better. It's going to be much more interesting, a lot of texture. This one, I use just regular printer paper for my crumpled paper, and I think I like it even better than the wax paper. And then the salt, this should be dry. I can just kind of brush the salt. It gets a little bit stuck in the paint, but you should be able to see that it does leave behind some interesting little marks where the salt once was. I can't wait to see what you guys create using these watercolor techniques, and I hope you post a picture in Padlet.